Hey, welcome to Tape to Tape, powered by the Ram 1500 Sport, built exclusively for Canadians. Rory, this was the day. A solid trade deadline day here. We've got winners and losers to talk about. We're going to bring in Dan Murphy to talk about the Vancouver Canucks. We're going to bring in Mark Spector to talk about, I would say, a surprisingly active Edmonton Oilers team. And Luke Fox to talk about a Toronto team that was fairly quiet today, but still some news, and Lord knows there's always a lot to talk about around the Maple Leafs, especially in the aftermath of losing games to beer league goalies. But we got to start with the winners and losers.
It's funny every time. I can't get past that.
It is something else. It is something else. Some would say something else is trading a top six second line center like Vincent Trocheck for a pile of shoulder shrug, would we say, to the Carolina Hurricanes? Maybe with the biggest deal of the day, the Florida Panthers moving Trocheck to the Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina was definitely a winner. I mean, I feel like this has to be the deal that has the most legs, or potential for the most legs from today.
Yeah, do you see the vein popping out of my forehead?
I see some throbbing.
I'm so upset with this deal from the Florida side. It makes no sense. It makes no sense at all from the Florida side as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you got worse. You came out of the trade deadline worse than when you went into it. And the need that they had on defense, they didn't take care of either. So it blows my mind that this was the move that they made. I mean, how often does a solid second-line center with term for less than $5 million come available, and Florida's the team that makes them available, and they get, I mean, I guess the main part of this trade coming back is Erik Haula, who's a fine player, but he's a UFA this summer, so there's no control whatsoever, and you get Lucas Wallmark, who's an okay player too. He's a middle six forward, probably more towards the third line than the second line though, and a couple of prospects who have some promise, but they're secondary or tertiary prospects, right? They're not big names. And I look at this and I think, why didn't they just wait until the summer when they would have had a bigger market for Vincent Trocheck and probably would have gotten a much better return and this does nothing for their playoff push. It's very disappointing from that side of things. And I mean, I haven't seen Dale Talon's post-deadline presser yet. I don't know if he's had it at this time of recording, but I'm curious to see what his reasoning is because, yeah, I mean, they're in the playoff hunt right here against a Toronto Maple Leafs team that, like you said, just lost to a beer league goalie. So both teams are struggling. Why are you seemingly throwing up the white flag? But on the other side of the coin, Carolina is the big winner of the day as far as I'm concerned.
You think so? So picking up Vatanen as well. He's nicked up, but is going to be able to help the decor. And then Brady Shea, a guy who signed long-term, 25 years old. They had 2 first-rounders. They had the Leafs in their pocket, so they had one to play with, and they sent it to the Rangers.
Yeah, so, I mean, you look at all of the 3 trades together for Carolina, a second-line center, 2 top-4 defensemen, one of which is going to help your power play and be that puck mover. I mean, Carolina is somehow always looking for defensemen. They get 2 more today. And you give up, again, the big things that you give up are a pending UFA, a middle six forward, a first-round draft pick is the biggest expenditure that you had across those 3 trades, and a couple of pieces that could be used in basically any kind of trade. These are 3 impact adds for the Carolina Hurricanes. And again, Trocheck, like, this is for the future as well. Vatanen, I would guess you're probably going to lose on the UFA market, although we'll see how that plays out. But Shea is controllable. He's a young defenseman. So this is not just a move for this year, which Carolina is much better coming into this trade deadline than they were going in. But this is also for the future. And again, getting back to Florida, Florida's also competing against Carolina for this playoff spot. And you've just given up. You probably lost the trade with Toronto for Dennis Malgin, and now you've lost this trade to Carolina. I'm sorry to keep going back to Florida here, but it is crazy because Carolina comes out of this, A, the big winner on the entire league for what they added versus what they gave up, and B, where they're sitting in the playoffs right now, kind of on that, bubble in that fight for the wild card, and they could probably still make a shot at third in the Metro there. And I would actually probably bet on them right now to finish in that third in the Metro, as long as their goalies hold up, which is a whole other question. But as far as the team goes, like, much better put together, and maybe they can get by for the next little bit with the goalies that they have if they play the way we saw them play against Toronto, which is strong defense. They've been known for that for a long, long time, and keeping those shots to the outside. Maybe it's a little less important to having to make a goalie upgrade right now at the deadline and pay maybe a little bit too much. Wait a little bit, and then you'll get Mrazek and Reimer back, and those are your goalies for the playoffs.
Safe to say we both like what Edmonton did. We're going to talk to Spec about that. So let's talk about another, I would say, universally acknowledged winner, the Vegas Golden Knights, especially if we, go back to picking up Alec Martinez, who's sort of turned into Paul Coffey since going there. 2 goals in 3 games, had
crazy.
1 in 41 with
Did you
LA.
see that Mark Stone pass on his stick? Oh, my God. It's perfect saucer pass in the air, lands right on his stick, right beside the net. Check out that highlight because it also gives you more appreciation for how great Mark Stone is as a player.
Well, hey, that was last deadline's big move for Vegas, but they were at it again and went out and got Robin Lehner. Cue the goalie controversy, I guess, in Vegas because, Marc-Andre Fleury hasn't been top of the charts this season, and Lehner has proven in his time in Chicago that last year was no fluke. It's just... You have to zoom out sometimes and remind yourself, this team is in year 3 of its existence, and it is as all in as any team out there. The GM is already a new GM. Granted, someone just went upstairs, George McPhee. They fired their coach out of the blue. And now you're like, are they kind of shoveling the franchise face to the, to the second stage? Because, you get Robin Lehner, you intend to play him.
Yeah, the thing with Vegas is always, I think they can win or go far in the Stanley Cup playoffs as long as Marc-Andre Fleury holds up. And now you still have that, but Robin Lehner as I don't even know if you can call him the backup. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out down the stretch. But I feel much better about Vegas now because they have that security blanket. Whoever starts, you're probably feeling pretty good about. 2 years ago when they went to the Stanley Cup final, through the first 3 rounds, Marc-Andre Fleury was lights out, like historically great, and tracking towards maybe the best playoff any goalie has ever had. And then he was garbage in the Stanley Cup final, and it's tough not to think of smiley Marc-Andre Fleury as he's an old guy now. Yeah, as far as the NHL,
I know
right?
It is. I even today saw, I think it's 35, and I was like, that just can't be right.
And he's never had a backup in Vegas, so they've always had to give him so many starts, and it's legitimate. This is a league-wide conversation now that teams are turning towards tandems to rest their starters, and now you've got a guy in his mid-30s who you're having to lean on. Now you've got a backup, a tandem really for him. You can rest him as much as you want down the stretch, and really, I think you get to the playoffs and it's a hot hand situation, and you can just go with whoever's playing well. If it's Fleury, they probably go with Fleury. If it's not, then they go with Lehner. And I wonder if they're going to try and sign Robin Lehner even to go forward with, because they didn't give up as much as I thought Robin Lehner was going to go for. I thought if Robin Lehner went for less than, let's say, a first-round pick or a prospect who's got some impact, that the Blackhawks might just try and hold him, might try and re-sign him. But the return was a little bit underwhelming. And so Vegas, if they can also get him signed to a contract, now you've maybe got a transition that can happen in the future where Fleury's going to age out and his contract's going to expire, and now you can just slide onto Robin Lehner, and that's your goalie of the future, kind of. It's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be fascinating to see this whole thing play out for Vegas. I think at the very least, it reestablishes them as the team to beat in the Pacific, if not the entire Western Conference.
Before we bring in Luke quickly here, any teams you want to talk about on the good or bad side of the ledger?
Well, I think we've hit on most of the teams on the good side, except for Ottawa.
Yes.
They
Great
just
return for Pajot.
I was shocked that they got a first-round pick plus for him. Really, it's a first and a second-round pick. The third is contingent on New York winning the Stanley Cup, which I don't think either of us are
Pajot probably doesn't put him over the top.
Yeah. So that they got a first-round pick back for him was absolutely huge. And Ottawa's got just draft picks galore now, and that's really what they needed to do. The most amazing thing, actually, was that the return for Pajot was so similar to the return to Mark Stone last year, where instead of the first-round pick, it was Eric Brandstrom, who was a first-round draft pick, which is just it blows your mind, right? But this really is where Ottawa needs to be right now, just accumulate draft picks. And the 2020 draft is being called an extremely strong one. Pierre Dorion was on our broadcast recently, and he himself said the first 20 players, there's different tiers, but the first 20 players are very, very strong. Now Ottawa's looking at a very real possibility of having 3 picks within that first 20, maybe 2. I mean, depending on what happens with San Jose, they could get 2 in the top 10, 2 in the top 5. They can have the top 2 picks in the draft.
They can dream.
I mean, it's unbelievable, right? So I think Dorian, who I have been critical of him in the past, of especially last deadline, I didn't think he got enough done. I think this deadline, he really hit it out of the park and sets up Ottawa very well to maybe shoot them out of the rebuild quicker than it seems. Maybe it's going to take another year or 2 at least, as long as their scouting department does well at the draft, that this team could come out of this season looking really, really, really strong in the pipeline. Anyone
you thought really whiffed?
Well, I mean, you're wanting to get me talking about Florida again, but they were the biggest whiffers. The other one I think was Chicago, just because of the return for Leonard just wasn't what you thought it was. There weren't a lot of obvious losers, I didn't think, beyond Florida. I mean, everybody did kind of pretty well. The other team that I was going to put in my losers was Vancouver, more for the fact that they lost their starting goalie than anything they did or didn't do at the deadline.
I'm going to throw in a small winner. I love the Buffalo Sabres going out and showing the fans a little something by picking up Wayne Simmons. I like it. You know what? It's a small price to pay to say it's been an awful year and at times really awful. We're kind of, sort of in the hunt. Hey, the team we're chasing is, can't stop shooting itself in the foot. So good for Buffalo.
In case I haven't made it clear, Florida's clearly given up on this season. But there was a lot of pushback on that Buffalo Sabres trade. And what I will say, I don't think they're making the playoffs or even making a charge. But they're 7-3-1, I think, in their last 10, something like that. Much better than either Toronto or Florida. So there is a case to be made that right now they're the hottest team out of those 3, and maybe they can make some kind of a push. But this time of year, man, it's just so hard to make up points with the loser point in the standings. You can have a fantastic run and still only make up 1 or 2. So it's going to be an uphill battle for sure. But it was curious to see them make the Simmons trade, but I kind of agree with you that it was a good thing to see them try to make an impact move at least.
All right, the team, or one of the teams the Sabres are chasing, is those Toronto Maple Leafs. We're going to bring in Luke Fox on the other side of the break to talk about what did and didn't happen with the Leafs on deadline day, and look back at what's been a pretty zany week in Leafland. So stick around for that right here on Tape to Tape. Pleased to be joined now by Sportsnet's Luke Fox. Luke, before we get to deadline day in the Maple Leafs, we are not done talking about Saturday night yet. You were there. Just tell us what it was like in the building after the game. I mean, what a night for a backup, or a beer leaguer, I should say, who really had a moment in the sun.
It was unbelievable. I don't think, a lot of games come and go and the details kind of blur, but I'm never going to forget being at the rink for that one. It was just an unbelievable situation, and going into his scrum after the fact, and he was just on this crazy high. His dream had come true, something that he never thought would even be possible. And he was fantastic, and the Hurricanes were awesome. The way Rod Brindamore talked about it and the way the other players rallied around him, it was really something to see. It was like no one thought they had a chance, especially after the first couple shots went in. So for him to, hold the fort, make 8 saves, they didn't have to be beauties, but for him to get a win at 42 years of age, it was just remarkable. And the fact that I saw him peeling off his gear, and underneath his Hurricanes sweater, he had a Toronto Maple Leafs T-shirt on. The irony was too rich. It was awesome.
So, already going into that game, the Leafs were unstable, I guess. I mean, they're just one team one night and one team the other. Too often, they're the bad version of the Maple Leafs, and then you lose to a 42-year-old beer league goalie. I mean, you get to this point in the season, and you sometimes it's a mental game, and you grip the stick too hard, and all that stuff. So, how does this Maple Leafs team, dealing with everything they're doing, mentally or can they even mentally move on from that embarrassing? I mean, the word embarrassing has been used around this team so often lately, but how do they move past this latest embarrassing loss?
Well, it's going to be tough, especially since their next game's in Tampa. And then they got a critical one against the Florida Panthers. And you know what? One thing I do appreciate about Kyle Dubas and Sheldon Keefe is they're kind of being honest about it. Sheldon actually said, like, this one's going to take a while. It's going to take a while to get over this. You know, it was embarrassing, but they have no choice but to do it. And, you know, Dubas was saying today, and it's the only thing you can say, is that these types of embarrassments, this adversity, these trials that they're going through have to make them stronger. They have to learn from it and grow from it, or else it's just going to break them. But you'd like to think, you know, the core of this group is still well under the age of 25. You think this is some scar tissue that maybe they'll even be able to look back and laugh at later. But it's really taken a hold of this city. Like, I was taking my son to his game and his practice yesterday. I had my own beer league night, and it's all anyone wanted to talk about was Dave Ayres. And some people thought it was just, this feel-good story. But a large portion of people are like, I'm done with this team. Like, I don't want to watch the next game. They're too frustrating. And I get it. Like, I think what makes them frustrating is the fact that this game came on the heels of Thursday's game against Pittsburgh, which I would say was their most complete win, their best front-to-back effort. You know, Freddie was amazing. Their big guys performed. They were battling for pucks. And then they have this thing served to them on a platter, and they just choked. They just couldn't generate shots.
So all of that set the stage for a deadline day today where we didn't really know what to expect from the Leafs, and it felt like there was at least a possibility with all the Tyson Barrie chatter that something big could happen in the end. All really minor stuff for the Leafs. What do you make of how this day unfolded? We'll set the Muzzin contract aside and address that later. But in terms of actual trades that did or didn't happen, what do you make of what happened, and what did you think? You know, what was your gut telling you coming into today?
I think Kyle Dubas has dealt with the harsh realization that this team is not a Stanley Cup contender yet. I think he's had to take a step back. I think at the beginning of the year, I think he thought anything was possible. But, you know, actions speak louder than words. And the fact that Boston was a big-time buyer, Tampa was aggressive the last few days, Washington, Pittsburgh, those are the real teams in the East that are going for it. And they showed that by their actions, by going out and buying. And I think the last month made Kyle kind of second-guess it a little bit and say, you know what, maybe this isn't the year. Maybe I got to save some of my bigger chips for later, because I don't think I'm one piece away. The growth has to come from within. This team needs to grow some killer instinct and getting a nice depth defenseman, because there were some guys out there, won't do the trick. So I think it's been a tough road for him, and I think it's actually been pretty trying on him.
So the good thing, I guess, for the Leafs, if there is something good to come out of this trade deadline day, I've already had my Florida Panthers rant. They got worse. How do you handicap the Leafs coming out of the deadline now that those moves have been made?
I still think they're a playoff team, in part because the Panthers got worse. I thought when I first saw the Panthers trade of Trocheck, I was like, okay, there's got to be another move coming. He's setting something up. But now we just get word that they're trying to shed salary when they just paid Bobrovsky an exorbitant salary. I don't know what the direction is there. But I think I did. Sorry, Rory. I know that. But I do think this team is better than the Florida Panthers. If they lose out to them and don't make the playoffs, I think then this has become an even greater disaster. So I think they're just going to roll the dice. You know, they weren't going to sell Tyson Barrie for pennies on the dollar just to salvage something from what in hindsight looks like a poor trade on Dubas's part. But at the time, you know, a lot of people thought he was addressing the right need, and I'd throw myself into that group. At the time, I thought it was a decent gamble, but he wasn't going to just sell him off, and he didn't get the offer he wanted, which was a first plus a prospect.
Do you think it's a given that Barrie is gone to free agency this year, or is there any chance that he'll re-sign? Did Dubas touch on that?
Yeah, he was asked that, and his answer said, led me to believe that he's gone. He said, we'll play it out. We'll see how the fit goes. But as you know, we have salary cap issues. I just think it's been a bit of a rocky road, and I do believe that Tyson will get more money elsewhere. It hasn't quite been the fit that they were hoping for. So I think he's. This was the risk right from the beginning. They got him for 1 year. It was kind of like a 1 year rental, really. Like he would have to score like 4 overtime winners in the playoffs or something for them to bring him back, I think.
Luke, let me just zoom out a bit. I mean, we're talking about this crazy week, but I feel like it's been a microcosm of the whole season. So much has happened with this team. I just feel like there's been 3 or 4 times where you've thought, oh my God, they're like 1 loss away from true crisis. And then 3 or 4 times where you've thought, boy, they've really got it together now. Like it must be quite a wild ride down there covering this team that just keeps kind of veering from side to side.
Oh, it is, absolutely. And I can't even wrap my head around the number of storylines that have been this season, like Austin Matthews' little run-in with the legal dispute, Mitch Marner's contract negotiations. Those feel like 4 years ago now.
They do. They really do.
So much has happened, Even Babcock's firing feels like a long time ago. This team has endured a lot, not to mention a really unusual amount of injuries.
Yes.
Good news today. Both CC and Riley were back on the ice. That's promising. Riley said, it was more like going public skating. Like he took it pretty easy. But there is promise that they're going to come back sometime in March. But yeah, this team has been dealt a lot of adversity because prior to this year they'd been relatively healthy and they've just been hit with a lot. And they haven't responded the best way. There's still an immaturity or a fragility or something in that room. And the optimist in me says that it will make them stronger down the road. But we're gonna have to see this thing play out. I think there's going to be a few more twists and turns.
Yeah, who knows what the last 6 weeks will hold here. Luke, thanks so much for joining us on a very busy day for you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
That is Sportsnet's Luke Fox talking about the Leafs. We've got a lot more to come here on Tape to Tape, so stick around. Hey, welcome back to Tape to Tape. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a very good chance you're into fantasy hockey. Don't forget, sign up for the Sportsnet Fantasy Pool presented by RAM. Just go to sportsnet.ca/RAM to win $50,000 in cash prizes and potentially a 2020 Dodge Ram, a 2020 Ram 1500 Sport. I'm going to try and win a little money in my pool by picking up Thatcher Demko because he's going to be getting some starts these days. Mm-hmm. And to talk about that, we now bring in Dan Murphy of Sportsnet. Dan, I think the big news of deadline day here, if you're a Canucks fan, the news that Jacob Markstrom will be on the shelf for what sounds like a not insignificant amount of time.
Yeah, no significant trade for Jim Benning, but he had to make a trade for a significant reason, and that's the Markstrom injury. Who thought that something bad could have come out of the 9-3 win over Boston on Saturday, but apparently Markstrom was hurt in that game. And they didn't think it was anything major. He flew to Montreal. It started to stiffen up. Got an MRI in Montreal yesterday, and sure enough, they're saying 3 to 4 weeks. I think it might be a meniscus tear, but we're waiting for official word. But certainly, it's Thatcher Demko's time now. I'm guessing that Domingue they felt was a better third goaltender than Zane McIntyre, who they sent the other way from Utica. And they don't want to use Mikey DiPietro up here at this level quite yet. So significant news, especially when you consider that the Canucks made one deal already a week ago for Toffoli, and that was because Betcher's out until pretty much the end of the regular season. Levo's out to the regular season's done, and Michael Ferland is done for good this season. So the moves that Benning made were mainly because of injuries and not so much trying to bolster and add at this time of year.
So Demko, the goalie of the future, is now the goalie of the playoff push for the Vancouver Canucks. Tell us about him. What kind of a goalie is he right now? He's still a young guy, but he's going to get thrown right in the fire here. Is he going to be able to hold the fort while they chase down a playoff spot?
Well, he's been pretty good this season. He just suffered his first ever, I think, regulation loss at Rogers Arena recently. He's like 10-2-1 there, I believe. He is 24 years old. He reminds me a lot of Corey Schneider when Schneider first became a Vancouver Canuck. And I know they're both Boston College guys, both Americans, but very cerebral, really good speaker, very interesting guy. And his numbers have been good, especially early in the season. And he had a bit of a tough spell November and December in some starts, but has kind of come back here recently. So I think they have confidence in him. This is one thing, talking point in Vancouver is the expansion draft. What are they going to do? Because if they re-sign Markstrom, they feel like they're going to lose one of these two guys somehow in that expansion draft. But now Demko's going to get a chance to show he belongs, show he can be a number one, and the Canucks are going to have to lean on him heavily because they do have some back-to-backs coming up, and March is one of the busiest months of the season for them.
So you rhymed off the injuries: Besser, Ferland, Levo. Tyler Toffoli obviously looked great, especially on Saturday when everyone looked great when they pumped the Bruins. But did you expect maybe Jim Benning would do something else to address the forwards, or did you have a sense it was, probably going to be a quiet day from that perspective for Vancouver?
Well, I think one thing is because they believe Besser's going to be back before the end of the regular season, so that kind of affected things with their cap, where they couldn't add as much in terms of a salaried player. I thought they were looking at some toughness. That's why you heard about Wayne Simmons' name around Vancouver for a bit, and also a depth defenseman. But I'm guessing those pieces were just a little bit too expensive for Benning's taste. Let's not forget he gave up a significant asset to get to Foley in Madden, a rising prospect and a second-rounder. So I don't think they were in position to really move any more assets. So when you consider also that if they make the playoffs, they don't have a first round this year, either because of the Miller trade. So I thought it was always just going to be depth. I never really believed in the Barry thing. And Benning says he wasn't shopping Stetcher, but certainly teams were calling on him because they know the pickle that Vancouver could be in at the end of the season trying to re-sign him. But Benning didn't want to subtract from this roster right now while this team is trying to make a push for the playoffs.
So the Canucks did make an impact trade in this trade season, getting Tyler Toffoli from the Los Angeles Kings. It's been a week, but how has he been fitting in so far?
Well, he's been great. Right away they put him on the top line alongside Pettersson and Miller, which is a pretty fun line mates to have. But he kind of fits that player that, Benning has kind of looked for, guys that are a little bit bigger, that they play heavy on the puck, they win their puck battles, a total Travis Green type of player. And they got that with Levo. They got that with Pearson at the deadline last year. They thought they were getting that with Ferland, who, of course, has been hurt. So he's been an excellent fit so far. He has replaced Brandon Sutter on the first unit power play, who replaced Besser when he got hurt. But so far, so good. But let's be honest, guys, with Markstrom out, and now no real help on that second line for Bo Horvat. So that means Louis Eriksson will continue to run shotgun on the second line until Besser comes back. This next month is going to be a real test for this Vancouver Canucks team to try to keep up in the Pacific Division, because Vegas has found its legs. Edmonton seems like it had a great day, and Calgary is starting to find the offense as well. So it's going to be some tough sledding.
Yeah, that you took my next question right out of my mouth there, Dan. I just wonder how you handicap their chances in this division that's been crazy all year. And as you noted, those teams made those moves. Of course, Arizona made its move 2 months ago, getting Taylor Hall. It's going to take some real resilience. They're just embarking on the stretch now without Markstrom, as we didn't know they were going to face these circumstances. Yeah. But based on what you've seen from this group, do you think they have the chutzpah to hang in through this?
Well, without the Markstrom news aside, if we were just grading the deadline time the last week, right up until the Leonard trade, I thought probably Toffoli was the most impactful player that came into the Pacific Division, more so than Athanasiou and Green and Ennis, although all those three guys together should make a significant impact for Edmonton. So I think Vancouver still got the player they targeted, still got the help they wanted. And I will say one thing. There's been a couple times this season where you thought the Canucks were going to, fold the tent like in seasons past, but they've always seemed to have a good response. And I think there is a backbone to the team that perhaps wasn't there last season or the season before. So they have done well in tough times before, and, they're still positioned in a pretty good spot. So as long as the Markstrom news doesn't derail Vancouver, kind of like the Kemper thing did to Arizona for a while, I think this team will hang right in there.
Well, big test coming up for sure. We will see how they fare. Dan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, that is Sportsnet's Dan Murphy. Stick around for more trade talk on Tape to Tape. Hey, time now for our overtime segment, brought to you by Subway. No joke, Subway now delivers. Joining us today, a man who covers the very busy Edmonton Oilers on trade deadline day. It is Mark Spector. Mark, did you have a sense that this was going to be a busy day? And did you think that maybe Mr. Holland was going to be this type of buyer here?
No, I have to admit, I didn't think, frankly, that they had the assets to expend, and I wasn't sure that they didn't have much cap space either. But, Ken Holland's a veteran guy, and he managed to kind of find his way around the edges here, right? He didn't get any huge players. I would say Athanasiou's a pretty big fish in the trade deadline pond today, but Tyler Ennis is a bottom six guy that can help a team whose forwards are a little bit too slow. And I didn't see them going out and getting a defenseman in Mike Green. But, if you're going to go get a guy, why not get a guy who's been running a power play for 900 games in the National Hockey League?
So let's go through the guys that they got one by one. Start with Andreas Athanasiou. I mean, first of all, I can't wait to see him play alongside, I assume, Connor McDavid, which could be the fastest line maybe in NHL history. But I also thought it was interesting that it's a player that Holland has a history with, who's been up and down in his time in Detroit. They had a difficult contract negotiation at one point too, and he's going to be an RFA. What did you make of that trade, and how and where he's going to fit into that lineup?
Well, from a trade standpoint, Ken Holland gives up 2 second-round picks for Athanasiou. So he said, look, I'm not giving up a first-round pick for a rental. I'm not giving up a high prospect for a rental. So this is a player that's a pretty high price, 2 second-rounders, but the player's under Edmonton's control. He's an RFA for the next 2 years after this one. So you've acquired a player that you're going to have for a while, so the price tag is quite fair, I would think. Let's just all agree that he's going to play on the left side with Connor McDavid. And, 2 players with that much speed on the same line is, I was trying to think back. I mean, I can remember watching the Anaheim Ducks. I'm not saying that Athanasiou is a Hall of Fame player. That's not what I'm saying. But I remember watching Anaheim Ducks when Teemu Selanne and Paul Kariya played together on that team. And when they busted over their own blue line and broke into a 2-on-1, it was just something to behold. And I think that we're talking that level of speed. Connor McDavid is certainly the fastest guy out there. And Athanasiou is right very close in the top 5 in the league. So, oh boy, that's probably going to be a lot of fun. What kind of player is this guy? He's minus 45 in Detroit, so I think everybody's a minus player there. Yeah. Maybe he'll be a better player on a team when he's a supporting character as opposed to being, a leading guy in Detroit. How about that?
I love that. And that quick line, you're comparing it to that Ducks line. These guys get to do it in an era where the league is way more wide open and friendly to that kind of game than when Kariya and Selanne were playing next to each other.
Mm-hmm. Well, Connor McDavid comes back last night after 6 games off with injury, and he's just the best player on the ice. I mean, It was unbelievable. Plays in LA. I know LA, their last place team, but he was the best Oiler too. And he's just breaking in here. He'll get better now that he's got a game under his belt. Connor McDavid is just, he's absolutely an incredible player. And having a burner like this with him, it's probably going to be a lot of fun to watch.
So we think that's where Athanasiou is going. Where do you see the other 2 guys, Ennis and Green, slotting in?
Ennis is a guy that, I would slot him in a third-line left wing. Here's the deal on the Oilers. Their forward group isn't fast enough. They've got obviously a real fast guy in McDavid, but generally speaking, they've got a few too many plotters. So you'll take out a kid named Tyler Benson, who was trying to make his way out of Bakersfield here. He'll go back to Bakersfield. He's not quite ready. And you bring in a guy who can really skate in Tyler Ennis. So speed's everything in the game today, guys. And Edmonton with Athanasiou and Ennis in their top 12, they just got faster at 2 positions.
So along with Edmonton in the Pacific, Calgary and Vegas got some business done today. Before the deadline, Vancouver got Toffoli. Long ago, Arizona picked up Taylor Hall. So coming out of the deadline, these are the teams that are set now. How do you handicap the Oilers against their competition in that division?
Well, it's a good question. I think that if I had to, take my 100 and put it down on a team right this second, I'd probably pick Vegas to win the division.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to go down to the last weekend. The Oilers got considered like reasonably better today, reasonably better. And they've been a team that's been right at the top of this division the whole way. Calgary got a little bit better. I don't think they got the big move that they wanted, right? They got a couple of sort of depth defensemen, but they didn't hit the home run they were looking for. And Vancouver, the biggest news out of there today, of course, is Jacob Markstrom being injured. That's absolutely giant news there because, much like the Toronto Maple Leafs, Vancouver Canucks depend on their goaltender even more than most teams. So, I think Edmonton's right there. They got two fabulous superstar players here in Draisaitl and McDavid. They've got some defensive depth. They got the best power play in the league. They got the number 2 PK in the league, and they're getting goaltending. So if all those ingredients can't add up to a playoff team, guys, I'm not sure what does.
Well, and I wonder, too, how much in the past couple weeks, seeing this team respond well and show a little something when McDavid went out, that must have made Holland, move at least an inch in the direction toward, I want to do something to help these guys.
Yeah, for sure. He said that today. Like the players and the coaches and everybody, they've been sucking it up all year here. And, general managers, they don't have that many opportunities to jump in with the guys and pull on that rope proverbially, right? They build their team in the summer when no one's around and they're working out of an office. And then there's not many moves for the start of the first 3-4 months of the season. And this is it, man. This is a trade deadline. And it's still a sport. It's still a bunch of guys getting together and trying to win something here. And even at Kenny Holland's, advanced age, he feels like he's got to jump in with these guys who have done such a good job. Now the puck's on his stick here for a couple days. And he had to make this team better and show them that, yeah, I'm in. And it's my time, like every player on every team, right? You get your moment to shine. And this last few days, it's the general manager's moment to shine. And he did. He made his team better. This team's going to show up at the morning skate in Anaheim tomorrow. They're going to look at Mike Green, who's been running a power play for, like I said, 900 games in this league. And they're going to look at Athanasiou and say, you know what? This guy's not bad. And Tyler Ennis comes in. He's a veteran player with good speed, and they're better. They're better today than they were yesterday.
Well, a busy and I would say very good deadline day behind the Oilers and behind you as well. We'll let you catch your breath. And, it should be fun covering this team down the stretch. Thanks so much, Mark.
I'm just going to go back to my room tonight and try to figure out how to consistently say the name Athanasiou.
AA. Just go with AA, buddy.
Be an expert.
All right. Thanks, pal.
guys.
Enjoy the California sunshine.
Thanks, Spec.
That was Mark Spector from Anaheim, Rory. Big day for the Oilers. Big day around here at Sportsnet. You survived.
Survived another one. The next one's 365 days away. We'll
Yes,
do it again.
You got a little time to catch your breath.
You know what? I got to say, though, the buzz leading up to this deadline seemed really dull. And it didn't seem like a lot was going to happen. And granted, some big names that were mentioned were left on the table, like no Tyson Barrie trade, no Matt Dumba trade, and all that stuff. But in the end, I think it was busier than we expected it to be.
They got to leave us something for the draft, right?
They do.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
And of course, still lots going on in March. Tons of great playoff races. So make sure you're sticking around, listening to Tape, checking out sportsnet.ca as we turn for the home stretch. Check out Rory on Twitter, at Rory Boylan, myself, at Dixon on Sports. And check back next week for more glass rattling hockey action on Tape.